Xander.
Hello, everyone. This is Sirr's Movies, the official podcast of SirrWalker.com. I'm your host, Sterling Woods, and today I'm joined by my co-host, Evan Todd-McCoy. You can find more episodes on Spotify, Stitcher, Pocket Cast, and pretty much wherever else you find podcasts. Just so if you're unaware, this is a weekly podcast where we're going to discuss what we've been watching and follow up with an in-depth review of a movie every week. This week's movie is going to be Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. And like I said, if you've been listening for the last few weeks, you know I used to do this as a solo podcast, but as I said, I'm joined by co-host Evan Todd-McCoy. So if you'd like, go introduce yourself, Evan.
Hi there, I'm a Canadian freelance writer. I'm also a substitute teacher, and I have been writing for Sir Walker's Movies for a little while now, helping the site get off the ground, and I'm happy to join Sterling on the podcast, talking about movies every week.
Awesome. So, like I said, as we've been off for a few weeks, I've got kind of a backlog of stuff we've been watching. I'm probably not going to get into what we're looking forward to watching, probably just kind of just discuss it in this segment. So, I mean, without further ado, I mean, like I said, last week I watched Fantastic Beasts and Widows. I didn't get to it around to talking to it on the podcast, so I'll probably go ahead and talk about it right now. I mean, Fantastic Beasts was a letdown for me on pretty much every level. Did you happen to see that, Evan?
I didn't, and you're a Harry Potter guy, right? Like, you like Harry Potter?
I am.
Right on.
I love it. I read all the books. Like I said, the movies pretty much hit and miss for me. You know, didn't really work for me as much as the books did, but still I love being in the Harry Potter universe. So when the Fantastic Beasts came out, I was into it. Like I said, the last movie didn't kind of work as well as I had hoped it would, but it was still solid, and like I said, I was in the Harry Potter universe, so I was good. So I couldn't wait for this one to come out, and it did, and I hated it. It just really didn't work for me. I think they learned all the wrong lessons. They turned up the magic to 11, but didn't really care about the story. I mean, it's still kind of the Harry Potter universe, but you can tell that most of the decisions they made were for script reasons, not necessarily for story reasons. I didn't, look into it. I don't know how much input J.K. Rowling had into it, but it just didn't feel the same, So it was a real letdown for me. I know something you did see that I saw was Annihilation. Like I said, that's been out for quite a while. I just got around to watching it, and I know you said you loved it, but that was kind of a letdown for me.
Yeah.
What did you think about it?
Well, so before I saw Suspiria, the remake, which you could find a review of on Sirwalker.com, that was my movie of the year. Annihilation was my favorite movie. I like these esoteric science fiction movies quite a bit. I'd seen Ex Machina, of course, when that came out, so that was Alex Garland's previous movie. And I felt like Annihilation was just hitting me in all my right spots, so that's probably going to be in my top 5 easy this year.
I doubt it'll make it into my, dark horse category. It just, I don't know.
Not even a runner-up.
Not even a runner-up. Like I said, I think I told you off mic, I tried to watch it a few times and just fell asleep. And I thought that was just because I was up late and I needed to be fresh and, whatever. But just actually, when I watched it, I believe 2 days ago in the morning time, I just couldn't get into it. It was just very dull and boring. And, because I read the book, so I kind of knew what I was expecting, but it just didn't work for me at all. It just seemed very dull, and I guess it was more cerebral where you're supposed to think about it and blah, blah, blah. But I don't know, I appreciate it. It was very pretty to look at, but it was just a really kind of boring movie, in my opinion.
No, I get you. I think the number one criticism of it was that it's kind of abstract and slow moving, and it kind of holds you at arm's length. It's really, to me, what I liked about it was that it's a very aesthetic experience. Like, when we were talking about you trying to watch it too, I wasn't surprised that you were having trouble staying awake, because it's the kind of movie where it lulls you into this almost dreamlike state. I think there's music cues that are repetitive, kind of play over again in different scenes and try to get you into this kind of headspace. And if it doesn't work, you can't get there, and then it's just going to feel boring and slow. So I totally get that. I think that that's a fair criticism. Yeah, even though I disagree, it didn't feel the same way. I can see it. I can imagine a world where I watch that movie and and felt much as you do.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I can understand why people, appreciated it, but it just, just didn't do it for me. I hate to be that guy, but same with Widows. I know you really like that,
Yep.
and it just didn't really do it for me either. I really, honestly, I'm not really a Steve McQueen guy. I appreciate him on a technical level. I mean, I feel like he's, directing the hell out the movie, but it just, like I said, it just felt like unnecessary to me.
Like the whole
One of my
movie felt
worries.
unnecessary.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, I felt like it was because I thought it was going to be a heist movie, kind of similar, like a drama version of Ocean's 8, where
Sure.
it's a heist movie with all girls. So I was kind of uninterested in that aspect because I don't care if it's going to be an all girls heist movie. That's just fine, but I don't want it to be an all women movie just for the sake of being all women. But the fact that it was directed by Steve McQueen, I figured it was going to be deeper than that, and it was, but it just wasn't what I cared to see. But there was very little actual action in it. It was more about the characters, but I wasn't drawn into it. I felt like the twists, no spoilers, but the twists were kind of both unnecessary and predictable at the same time, if that makes sense. I understand it was based on a TV show that was like, 10 episodes long or something like that. They kind of condensed into 2 hours, which is, I can understand.
I did not know that, actually.
Yeah, so based on, I think it was a British TV show that ran, I think in the 80s, something like that. And he watched it when he was, Steve McQueen watched it when he was younger and kind of always hooked into him. That's why that's where the movie came from. And I felt kind of like that way. I felt like the twists were maybe in a series format, it would have made sense and, it would have felt, more natural. But here it just felt, just kind of silly and just a movie thing. It just happened for the sake of being in the movie. And there was if you've seen the movie, you know what I'm talking about. But kind of at the end of it, there was a scene where something happened and somebody pulled out a gun and everybody in the theater clapped. It just didn't land on me in any way, shape, or form in the same way it did to the other people. So, like I said, I appreciate it for its technical aspect. Like I said, I didn't like 12 Years a Slave either. It's just not kind of, I don't know. I like the directorial style, but the movies just aren't my thing. So maybe I'm just not a Steve McQueen fan, but like I said, it just didn't work for me. What about you?
Well, I liked it a lot. Partly, it's interesting to hear you say that it was a series originally because I felt like this was the movie version of The Wire that I always want to see. Like what I liked about, like you, I went into it thinking that it was going to be kind of a more prestige-y version of Set It Off. I don't know if you know that movie, but that's an all-female heist movie with like Jada Pinkett and Queen Latifah.
Jada Pinkett.
Jada Pinkett. I always get that name wrong, man. My wife makes fun of me.
Yeah.
But I watched that movie when I was growing up. That was a big one in my household because my mom loved that movie. She loved women fighting back movies, right? So that was a big one. And I thought that Widows would be kind of like that. So I didn't expect it to be about sort of this vertical slice of all these different aspects of this community and like its politics and these racial tensions and these class tensions. And I really found myself when I was watching it digging into that stuff a lot. I don't always need that from a movie, but when you think it's just going to be kind of I don't know, like a crime caper movie, and it turns out to have so much more on its mind, that's usually a positive experience for me. Although I could totally see going into it and thinking it was going to be one thing, and then it's kind of doing something else, and you're kind of waiting for that one thing that you were looking for to come into play at some point, and instead it's throwing you all this stuff, and I think you're actually, the one criticism I would make of it that I would agree with you on is the twists do kind of come like they're not super well earned. So towards the end, the movie starts to get kind of movie-ish, really. And then the very, very, very end, though, I think, without spoiling it, capitalizes or cements the themes of the movie that we've been watching the whole time in a way that made up for it for me.
Yeah, I think I'm more of a caper kind of guy. If it would have been a straightforward, heist film, I think I would have just appreciated it more. I like that kind of stuff.
Yeah,
I'm not saying I don't appreciate dramas, but it just, I don't know, like I said, it didn't really work for me.
Did you like Ocean's 8?
No, didn't care for that at all. I didn't care for that on any level, pretty much. I think it was, I mean, I like, Rihanna's beautiful, so I like watching her in movies, but besides that, I thought it was silly.
I watched it for Aquafina, believe it or not. That was what got me through the door.
I had never heard of her until, I thought she was just kind of some no name until after the movie, but I found, she's kind of a big deal. I had never, I guess, the Venn diagram of our worlds never collided. I
Yeah.
didn't know she was a person until, no, not that she was a person, but
Yeah, I know
I
what you
didn't,
mean.
I know nothing about her until that movie.
I think that's a lot of people. Like that would be a breakout for her, and it's not that big of a role even. I thought for me, I thought Ocean's 8 was kind of fluffy. That's maybe why I liked Widow so much because I saw it I think a week or two after I saw Ocean's 8. Because I didn't see Ocean's 8 when it
Yeah,
came out. But I was just thinking of that one because of this whole idea of an all-female heist movie, which is it's actually kind of got a bit of a history. Like Set It Off was the '90s, you know.
yeah. Yes, I mean that was a well-made
You
movie,
liked Set
and
It Off?
yeah, and I mean the heist part. I mean, it was a major part of it. They were planning it to happen, and then After Effects.
Yeah.
This, Widows, that wasn't kind of the same deal. It was
There's a
more
lot. Yeah,
drama
there's a lot
than
more
that.
going on in that one.
Yeah, and Ocean's 8, like I said, it was just it was trying so hard to be an Ocean's movie that it didn't work at all because they kept mentioning Danny, and then they, very minor spoiler, but they killed off Danny, which is why he wasn't in the movie,
Oh,
which was completely, just why would you ruin
I
the Ocean's
know.
movie?
I thought he was
for
going
me?
to show up, man. At the end, I was
Don't.
choked when he didn't. That would have been
That
such a
would have
good
been,
ending.
yeah, it would have been. They could have worked that into the story. They killed him off unnecessarily just so they could make this movie, and I
And
thought
just
that
because
was,
George Clooney probably didn't want to come
yeah.
back, right?
Yeah, so I mean, he could have been, just off, in France somewhere. that's just fine, And they maybe could have talked him to coming back in the third movie or something. I feel like killing him off kind of just soured the Ocean's movies for me. And then their twist was, speaking of unearned twist, I don't know, that was kind of the most unearned, unnecessary twist I've seen kind of in the movie.
Yeah,
I think that was this year. Was that this year?
that was this year.
See, I don't even remember. Yeah, so
It's been a long year. We were
yeah,
talking about that earlier. That there's movies that stretch back to like the beginning of the year. That like Annihilation's a good example. I keep forgetting that's a 2018 movie. It feels like so long ago.
yeah.
Partly that's because it's been a good year for movies. I mean, almost every month there's been at least 2 features that have come out that have been pretty good. So, that might contribute. But I think it's just been a long year in a bunch of other ways too.
Yeah. And speaking of, I think, like I said earlier today, actually, I went to see Robin Hood. So that's the newest movie I've seen this year, and that's something I don't know. Like I said, I like the caper, the action type movies, and I was looking forward to it. I know it wouldn't really get great reviews, and I guess the marketing wasn't great around it. But I'm a big Jamie Foxx fan. Was his name Ethan Edgerton? I haven't really cared for anything he's done.
I think Aaron Edgerton. You didn't like Kingsman?
Aaron. No, didn't really care for it.
I'm getting it wrong too. It's Taron Edgerton or Edgerton. I think.
See,
Fuck.
that's how much I don't care about it. And because I the first time I saw him was in Eddie the Eagle, which was just the most atrocious thing. I
didn't watch it.
It takes a whole lot for me to walk out of a movie.
You walked
theater,
out of it?
I walked out of the movie theater, and actually I was seeing it for free because it's one of those things where you're on an email list where they send you a free ticket and you got to go wait in line and get there early, whatever.
They don't have those in the frozen north, I'm afraid.
Okay, yeah, but we're on some email list. My wife got free tickets to go see Eddie the Eagle, so I was like, "Hey, free movie, let's go see it." But it was terrible.
Now I kind of have to watch it because you walked out of it. I'm the same way, man. I can't remember last time I even shut a movie off. Like I was watching Jurassic World: Fallen Kingdom today. It's one of my recent movies, and I wanted to turn it off. I wanted to, but I just couldn't bring myself to do it. I think the last movie I turned off was Lone Ranger. That was years ago.
Yeah. And I wasn't on the end seat either, so it added even more pressure to me. I was like, this has to be really bad for me to inconvenience other people to walk out of this. But I was like, I just don't want to see this.
No doubt.
I just don't want to see. Yeah. So, but yeah. I said all that to say, like I said, I think this is my favorite performance of him.
Sure.
It's kind of Kingsman-esque. He's doing that kind of shtick where he's just kind of a cool guy. Funny, cool guy. But I think it works for him in this one. I guess because it's some more action. Like I said, I think his performance is my favorite, but the movie overall wasn't great. Like I said, Jamie Foxx. I'm a big Jamie Foxx fan, but like I don't know what he was doing in this. Like I said, his role was really weird. Like I said, I don't know what the point of this movie was. I thought this was going to be a kind of grittier comedy Robin Hood, which intellectually, I like that idea, but in the execution, it was a jumbled kind of a mess. So, like, if you're, I want to give a kind of full review on it. If that's something you want to see, I say go ahead and see it. But I mean,
Was it
overall,
fun at all? Would you say?
I think towards the end, it had fun moments. You know, it was like I said, it was an action movie. It was kind of predictable by nature, but I and they kind of twisted the cliche Robin Hood story, you know, just to make it entertaining. And like I said, that's what kind of hooked me and made me want to come see it, because I wanted to see a different take on the Robin Hood story. But the execution just wasn't great. I don't know. Like I say, it was worth seeing, I'd say, but it wasn't worth going to the movies. It's something, if you catch it on HBO, I definitely recommend it. If it's coming on HBO at 10 o'clock, definitely watch it. But,
yeah, I haven't seen it.
I can't say I recommend spending $20 to go see it.
My brother warned me off of it, and like what he said was that it was kind of like a mix between King Arthur from last year. I can't believe that was only last year, and The Dark Knight. And I was kind of like, well, that sounds kind of interesting. And I'm usually a sucker for movies like this one, even if they're bad.
I can see that.
But so hearing that, you would say don't go to the theaters, because it's still playing theaters where I am. Don't go to the theaters, but wait for it to come out on TV or HBO. That sounds pretty good.
I definitely recommend it. Like I said, it was. Like I said, it wasn't a total waste of my time. I would never say that, but it wasn't worth, a $20 ticket price to see. I put it like that. Like I said, it had its moments, but it was, like I said, it's kind of a cliche route, but it just wasn't, it wasn't great. I put it like that. I think that's pretty much it for kind of what I've seen. Like I said, I haven't done the podcast in a few weeks, so I had a little backstash of what I've been saying. But what about you? What have you seen kind of lately?
We've covered most of them. I would say the only one I haven't mentioned is A Simple Favor, which is it's Paul Feig, the guy who made Bridesmaids, and the Ghostbusters remake that everybody hated. And it's got Anna Kendrick and Blake Lively. And I was expecting it to be a bit more broad comedy than it was, and so I was pleasantly surprised by how dark it was willing to go. Although I do think by the end it kind of squandered that a little bit and went for some pretty broad, like twisty, kind of like I thought the finale was weak. We'll just put it that way.
Yeah, I saw it as well. The tone was the weirdest part about that for me, because when it was starting off, I thought it was just going to be kind of a sticky comedy, but then it kept getting serious. I'm 30 minutes in, I'm like, what am I watching? What is this movie? Like I said, yeah.
I kept mixing it up with Spy Who Dumped Me. I kept thinking when I was watching it, I was like, isn't this the one with the spies? And I don't know, like I usually don't make mistakes like that, but definitely for a little while there, I thought I was watching a spy comedy movie, and then I realized, no, wait, this is the one where Anna Kendrick is kind of a really uptight mommy blogger, and then she meets this really like suave woman who she kind of falls in love with. It reminded me a little bit of Ingrid Goes West, which is an Aubrey Plaza movie that I think is brilliant, but it wasn't anywhere near as good or as insightful.
Yeah, I don't like. So I saw it as well. The twist at the end just seems out of place, I guess. I feel like because of the tone, the kind of the quirkiness throughout the movie, I felt that they were going to go somewhere different at the end.
Yeah.
And when it ended how it did, I was like, okay, well, I guess it's over now.
Yeah. Yeah.
That was very anticlimactic,
And it's sort of soap opera-ish too. It relies on some pretty soap opera-ish twists and turns, and I thought that they were kind of clever to an extent. But it was also a pretty predictable movie, so it was almost like, I want to say it was good, it was okay. Not everything has to be amazing or dog shit. So it was nicely in the middle of those two extremes, right? Something that was worth an hour and a half, I think. My wife and I sat down and watched it, and it was all right.
Yeah, so yeah, it was okay.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah. I know you mentioned, you said I think you watched Red Sparrow recently. Is that right?
Yeah. So I know that movie, like Jurassic World, is an older one, but I've been catching up on some movies, and Red Sparrow is one that I just watched. And that, speaking of like marketing, I think we brought that up about Robin Hood. You mentioned the marketing was a little bit, and I think Red Sparrow is like probably the movie of the year that was like completely mismarketed. There's always one or two where I'm like, this movie is not the same movie that they're trying to sell me in the trailers, and sometimes that's really a good thing. In this case, I thought it was. Atomic Blonde last year was almost the same kind of story. Like And I don't mean story of the movie, but that movie was mismarketed as like a female John Wick, and what you get instead was like a really dense, kind of stylish spy thriller. Red Sparrow, they made it look like it was some kind of Black Widow movie, right? Like, but
Yeah.
it's not. It's actually the psychosexual like spy movie that's more interested in the psychosexual stuff than it is about being a spy movie. And I thought was super interesting, and the performances were amazing, right? So I like that one
I
quite a
actually,
bit more than I thought I would, given the trailer.
I actually kind of felt the opposite. I felt like it pretty much was the Black Widow movie I thought it would be, pretty much.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's kind of
I
how I
can kind
felt
of see
about it.
that.
And yeah, I mean,
I guess I
I
thought it was
know.
going
I
to be
mean,
just that, you know? Like, I thought it was going to be, like,
yeah.
reductive to think of it that way. But if you think of it as a positive, then I can kind of agree.
Yeah, well, rather being the straightforward, Black Widow movie that Marvel's probably never going to make, it was a rated R version of that, kind of giving a twist on what people wanted. And yeah, I mean, like I said, I didn't think it was, the movie of the year, but I thought it was a whole lot better movie going experience than, let's say A Simple Favor or something like that was. It was very
Yeah,
entertaining. I actually liked it better than I liked Atomic Blonde.
I did too, I
And
think. Yeah,
Atomic,
I agree
yeah,
with you. And I liked the Tall and Blonde more than most people did. A lot of people said it was boring or it sucked, and I actually liked it quite a bit. But I watched it way after it came out, just like with Red Sparrow. So sometimes that sort of distance from the movie's initial release reaction can make you appreciate its strong sides more. And I thought that about Red Sparrow definitely. The opposite with Jurassic World. Jeez.
not a big fan.
No, like I said, I almost turned it off. I wanted to. I just thought I've never seen a movie I think with an hour long first act. The whole movie is
Yeah.
trying to get to this point where it's a haunted house movie with dinosaurs, but it wastes so much time getting there, and it's just one of those movies that feels like it's trying to be two different movies, and neither of them are particularly good. But at least if they'd focused on one, it might have been interesting. I didn't like the first Jurassic World very much either. I thought it was superfluous and kind of appealed to like the worst, dumbest parts of like blockbuster cinema. And this movie had the same problems, but just more because the story wasn't even cohesive.
Yeah, that was watching the trailers. I really didn't want to see a follow up Jurassic Park where the island explodes and they have to save the dinosaurs and get away. And then I found out what the movie really was, and I was like, I would actually just prefer to see the island exploding and everybody trying to get away.
Yeah, yeah.
Because at that point, it's just like they're just sitting in the house, and that's the real movie you're trying to see.
Oh, and
And
the
I just
house
thought,
bits, like I've seen a lot of people talk about Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom saying that, well, their goal was to make the dinosaurs scary again, and it's kind of like a spook show haunted house. And I don't really agree. I feel like all the creepiest bits in the house are cribbed right from the first Jurassic World, from the sequences that take place inside of the visitor center. Like right down to the girls and the dumbwaiter, and she's pulling down the door of it, and it kind of visually is just a total echo of that bit in the famous bit from the first one where like he's trying to shut himself in that cupboard and the dinosaur smacks its head against the mirrored surface
yeah,
of the kitchen counters or whatever, right? So there's a lot of that sort of thing that people do when they're making reboots or reimaginings now, where they have to just like constantly reference the original in some way that I'm sure they think is clever but never really is.
yeah. And it suffered from the characters do things for script
Yep.
reasons rather than realistic reasons, kind of thing, where they just do the stupidest things they can do just because that's gonna make dinosaurs gonna chase them or something like that. I hate that kind of thing in movies. I understand that's what makes the tension and gives you the moment you like to see, but I just like scripts that make those happen more organically.
I agree. I think it should be invisible. It's like a magic trick. If you can see the rabbit falling out the bottom of the hat or whatever, it's not a trick, right? Like it's just you can see the strings in the puppet or whatever, and it ruins it. I agree with you about that big
Yeah.
time.
I mean, that's what we pretty much been watching. Before we jump into the main feature, I just kind of want to, just talk to you for a bit, get to know you. What are your favorite types of movies? Just let the audience get to know kind of what your take on movies in general is.
Sure. So I'm pretty eclectic. I like just about everything. I tend to be harder on movies that are like they should be good almost. That's a weird thing to say, but movies that have no real excuse to not dot the I's and cross the T's in terms of narrative. I focus a lot on story in movies. I got a background in narrative theory and design, and I tend to just like any movie that has a good story. But having said that, I prefer genre movies. I think I like science fiction and fantasy quite a bit. But I'll watch just about anything, and I think my tastes compared to Sterling skew a little more to like the indie and outsider. So I see a lot of those movies in between visits to the theater to see like superhero movies. And I love the MCU movies. You're not going to hear me defending the DC movies, although I am looking forward to Aquaman, and I did like Wonder Woman quite a bit.
Yeah, see me, I'm like I said, I think we were talking about books earlier, and I care more about stories than I do about the technical aspect. Like I was talking about earlier, I can appreciate a Steve McQueen movie, but if I'm going to the movie theater, I just want to see something well written that entertains me. I don't want to have to think about the scenes. I would much rather not poorly, but worse made movie that has a solid storyline than a very good technical movie that just doesn't make sense in any way. That's kind of where I love a good Marvel movie because it's I wouldn't say it's the reason I go to theaters, but I enjoy spending 2 hours watching a fully fleshed out story where people thought about why people do what they do. A lot of flashy lights and bangs, and it's all those. Like I said, you spend $200 to make a movie, you're going to do a better job with the script. I would hope so, but
a lot of times though that's not how it goes, right? Like the more expensive the movie is, the worse the storytelling. One of the things I like about the Marvel movies is that they usually, not all of them hang together as well as the next one. Like everybody's got their picks for which ones are the weaker ones, but I do think that they are that perfect intersection of like commercial art, so something that actually cares about being a story in the first place, and also like something that has a lot of those like whiz bang action figures smashing together, special effects, spectacle things. So I like all that too. That's why I like those movies so much. I got that core that I need, those themes that I like to like mull over and chew on when I'm watching a movie and afterward, but they also got the really good entertainment value like you're talking about.
Gotcha. Okay, that's kind of what to touch base with that. And now, with our kind of movie ideas in mind, we're going to go ahead and get into the full review of Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse.
Miles! Yeah? Gotta go!
If you want me to drive you, we gotta go now.
No, Dad, I'll walk.
Personal chauffeur going on.
It's okay.
Seriously, Dad, walking would have been fine.
Breaking news, Spider-Man saves the day again.
Spider-Man. This guy swings in once a day, zip, zap, zop, and answers the phone. Accountability.
Speed up. I know these kids.
Yo, Miles, man, you get arrested?
Gosh, don't cops run red lights?
Well, yeah, some do. But, not your dad.
In your universe, there's only one Spider-Man. But there is another universe. It looks and sounds like yours, but it's not.
That was from the trailer for Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. And so, Evan, you are new on the show, so let me get your opinion first. What did you think of Spider-Man?
I thought it was fantastic. Like, actually, like, the best animated film of the year, easy, and maybe one of the best films of the year. I think this has been a year where, like, there hasn't been a single bad comic book movie, with the possible exception of Venom. We would probably disagree about whether we could really call it bad or not. But, I think people are going to have a hard time deciding which their favorite is, Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse or maybe even Infinity War. I think Black Panther has them both beat. I think you'd agree with me on that. But, Spider-Verse was a pleasant surprise. My big takeaway from it was that I think that it's the movie that every VFX team in Hollywood and beyond should be they should be watching it. They should be forced to watch it, because one of the big problems with CG stuff, Venom had this problem, even Black Panther had it a little bit, is that it always feels weightless. It always feels like the sound design just isn't quite there to make it feel like it's real, like it has punch. But Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, every single scene, action or not, had that crunchy feel that it made it feel more real in some ways than movies that we watch that have tons of special effects and real people.
Yeah, I haven't seen many animated movies this year, so, if it's the best one this year, great. But just honestly, I thought it was just okay.
Oh, I didn't expect that.
Yeah, I thought it was, fine, but honestly, it felt more like a 2-hour, animated television series, than a I'm not sure why this was a full 2-hour movie. This felt like something I could watch on Saturday morning. I thought it was fine. I really liked Miles Morales. I liked, getting into his life. I liked they kind of fleshed out his story. It was a different take on Spider-Man, giving him his powers and whatnot. But, I mean, at the end of the day, this is something I feel like I could have just watched on TV. I don't know why I went to the movie theaters to watch this.
Did you feel like it was overstuffed kind of thing? Like there's too much, maybe too many characters or too much going on for it to be contained really by a 2-hour movie?
Yeah, I guess, well, now that I think of it, because all the posters and the trailers talk about how there are 6 different Spider-Mans and how cool that is, but, I mean, they didn't do a whole lot. The point of the movie was that they were there, period, and how to get them back home, but, I mean, there was really nothing, there was no reason for them to be there. There was, 3 main bad guys. The Spider-Men fought the bad guys, and then they went, let me not get into what happened after they came, but I mean, it just didn't seem like it was worth a whole lot. I didn't really see the point in having this be a 2-hour feature film. Most animated movies, I could talk about the Hotel Transylvania movies. Those are pretty good. They tell a story. They're kind of like movies in animated form that are really, that are interesting. This just felt like, a cartoon. I really like the soundtrack. We can get into that later, but just the movie watching experience, I just felt I was entertained, but I was also felt like I don't know why I came to the movie theater to see this.
You didn't think that the animation style was unique or to me the whole movie looked super expensive, more expensive than all 3 Hotel Transylvanias all put together, and only because those movies have teams working on them that have been doing similar type movies for a decade, right? They don't look uniquely different from, say, Despicable Me, you know what I mean? The art style is similar, the level of artistry on display and animation technique, and I'm not a big animation guy, but I watch enough animated movies to have a sort of sense of this movie looked like it was really hard to make, or this is doing something new, and this other one isn't. And what I kind of thought was exciting about Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse was how new it felt visually. I don't use cliches like Feast for the Eyes very often, but I will use it for this. That was a all-you-can-eat buffet of the finest caviar for my eyes. Although I will say it took a little while to get used to the kind of stop-motion-y effect. I think about the first 10 minutes, I was kind of like, whoa, this is kind of stop-motion-y. They're moving in a sort of stilted way. But I got used to it, and in the end, I felt like it added actually a lot of readability to the action sequences. A movie this popping with color and motion, I wouldn't have been surprised if I couldn't tell what was going on half the time, and especially in the big action sequences. But I could, and I think it might be down to that stop-motion-y kind of feel.
Yeah, I don't know. I'll put it like this. I'm not an expert, I don't watch a whole lot of animated stuff, but it felt like I was watching the Ninja Turtles, the new animated Ninja Turtles where it's kind of more realistic. It felt kind of the same vibe to me.
I haven't seen
feel all that different. Yeah, and honestly, I didn't like the animation because I understand the reason that they did it to where it felt kind of like you were watching a 3D movie without 3D glasses at times, where it kind of got fuzzy a little bit.
Did you see it in 3D?
I understand. No, I saw it in 2D. That's what I'm saying. It just felt like there were little bits where how when you're watching a 3D movie, if you ever take off the glasses, it gets kind of fuzzy because they shoot the 2 different screens or whatever. That's kind of how I felt at moments that made it kind of hard to watch. And I understand. I'm in my head intellectually, I'm thinking they did that because it's supposedly the dimensions are collapsing and whatnot, or what have you, but it didn't look great to me at the end of the day, and I feel like that's what's supposed to matter when you go to watch a movie. So like I said, I cared about the story. I think it was very well fleshed out. I like to see young black people given a real story and not watered down. It felt very realistic, very it felt very reminiscent of The Hate U Give, to where they had the young black person going to a school where they don't really stand out, and I really appreciated that. But like I said, story wise, it just anything besides that didn't feel all that great. I felt it could have been any. This could have been any pilot episode to a Spider-Man TV show, and I would have felt exactly the same about it. I put it like that.
Okay, I can't take on the story stuff. I've got some stuff to say about that, but it might drift us into spoiler territory. Because I definitely agree that the strongest part of the story is the core Miles stuff, especially his relationships with his family members. And the movie does switch gears quite a bit when the Spider-Men show up, which is not a spoiler to say. But there's some stuff I definitely want to get into about that part of the story in our spoiler section.
And honestly, I was really interested in the Gwen Stacy. Her story seemed really interesting. She seemed like a much more, had her stuff together Spider-Man.
Yep.
She looked like she was kicking butt and taking names. She was a female character. She, I felt more like kind of a love interest kind of relationship, but they, at the end of it, let's be friends kind of thing. So her story just seemed much more interesting. Not to say I really like Miles' story and kind of where they took it, but I feel like they should have spent more time with her because that was very interesting. And actually, all the Spider-Man, I feel like all the stuff on the posters and the trailers, the multiple universe Spider-Mans, that they really got short shrift here in this movie. So
I kind of agree. I don't think the three, Spider-Ham, the pig guy, the Spider-Man from the anime universe, or Spider-Girl, I should say, Penny Parker, and then Spider-Noir who was Nicolas Cage. Those three didn't get full character arcs in the movie. They didn't learn anything. They didn't grow or change. But Gwen did, Miles did, and then there's 3 or 4 other characters actually in the movie that have arcs. Which outside of like an MCU movie, like a mainline one like Civil War or something, you don't expect to see a movie that can juggle that many characters and give them arcs. Miles' arc is the strongest. Gwen is up there, and I think Peter Parker, his arc is. I was really surprised and impressed by Peter Parker in this film. Actually, without getting into spoilers, I thought this was probably the best version of Peter Parker in a movie, except for maybe Tom Holland's version.
Oh no, let's go into the soundtrack, because there's so many things I want to say that I can't really get into it until I get to spoilers. Like I said, I feel like this would have been a really good, first episode or first 2 episodes of a TV show. This is a TV show I would actually like to watch.
Yeah.
But the fact that it's a movie, I felt like it just didn't do enough for me. If this was something I could actually tune into every week, I say, yeah, that's a great start. But the fact that this was the whole movie, I felt kind of, let down when it ended.
Well, when we get to the spoiler section, I'm definitely going to ask you what you thought was missing, because I think that's going to be interesting.
Definitely. So before we get there, let's talk about the soundtrack for a bit. And I really enjoyed that. I want to say it's kind of the best soundtrack I've heard since Black Panther, actually. And Black Panther, I believe, just got a whole bunch of nominations. So definitely, I think this will go places. What'd you think of it yourself?
Well, I thought it was excellent. I'm not super versed in hip hop or rap. I'd like to be more, but it's an overwhelming genre of music to get into. There's so many artists, and there's so much history, and there's actually quite a bit of almost forgive me if this is shallow, but almost like a WrestleMania level of connections between different people in the field, in the game, that you kind of have to figure out, because they all reference each other in their music, and there's lots of stuff like that to get into. It feels like getting into a whole hobby outside of even just being into music. But in a general sense, I thought that the combination of really hard beats in the movie and uplifting bits of music, the training montage song that they kind of half cut off to be a joke, Miles always singing that song, that high-pitched song, all the music stuff was perfectly on point, and I felt like the music was kind of bringing me in. And I really liked that there was a couple of sequences in the movie, particularly the leap of faith scene, without getting into spoilers, that where they really relied on music, and I love that in a movie when they'll just stop everything else going on and just have the visuals and the music. And
I will say that was kind of one of the best visuals I've seen this year. That was just a beautiful scene.
Yeah.
Even in the trailers, just watching them float like that, I thought that was really beautiful.
Totally agree.
But yeah, music-wise, like I said, this is kind of my genre. This is what I listen to kind of on a regular basis, and I just hearing the Post Malone in there. And then you hear Juice WRLD. It's I really like Juice WRLD's album, Unexpectedly, and then just hearing him in there, it's just I recognize that voice. I recognize Jaden Smith, and it's something like it's something to where immediately when I went home, that's something I put on my Spotify. I was like, let me listen to this playlist. Let me hear these songs, because it made me interested in going to hear these guys, because it really fit with the tone of the movie, with the character, So I don't know. I really enjoyed the soundtrack.
Yeah, I got to get at that as soon as I can. The Black Panther soundtrack's been on rotation for me since it came out. But like I don't know the genre well enough to name all the artists or to keep up with it. So I feel like I'll just pave that road with with movie soundtracks. That's how I got into music in the first place. Most music that I like now, it started with stuff that I heard in movie soundtracks. So I feel like if nothing else, Spider-Verse is going to get me into some music that I would have missed otherwise.
Yeah. All right. Well, like I say, any closing thoughts? Because it sounds like we have a whole lot of thoughts we want to give in spoilers. So before we get there, do you have any closing thoughts about Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse?
I would think a closing thought is I really recommend seeing this movie, even if you feel quite the same way that Sterling did, where it feels more like a long pilot for a TV series. I'd say, it's worth the theatrical experience because it's such a visual experience, and you're not going to get the level of fidelity in the sound and music anywhere but like the best home theater. So I would say go to a theater to see it. What about you?
Yeah, I think I'm sounding pretty negative on it, and I hate that because I didn't care for it as much as I hoped I would, just because all the hype around it. Everybody's saying it's the best animated movie this year, and it may be the best animated movie this year, but it's definitely not the best movie period I've seen this year. So I definitely did enjoy it. I really liked the soundtrack. It was very interesting. I like seeing all the different stuff about Spider-Man. So I'm gonna say it was definitely a good movie. It just wasn't great to me. So if you're listening to this, don't let me, come off thinking it's way worse than it is. I really did enjoy this movie, and you definitely should go see it. And without any further ado, let's dig into spoilers.
Dad, I love you.
That's a copy.
Time to swing, just like I taught you.
When did you teach me that?
I didn't. It's a little joke for team building.
Hey guys,
Okay, who are you?
I'm Gwen Stacy.
Come on. How many more spider people are there?
Save us a couple.
All right, so I want to ask you, now that we're in the spoiler section, this question of it feeling like a pilot for a TV series, or that kind of like felt like more like a Saturday morning cartoon show that you'd watch, but that kind of didn't hang together as a movie. I really want to talk about that a little bit because I can see it. I can see what you're saying. I can't dismiss that out of hand. But I don't really agree, and I'm wondering if we can zoom in a little bit, get into the nitty gritty, and figure out what you felt like was missing to make it feel like more of a movie.
I don't really feel like, actually, I don't feel like anything was really missing. It just wasn't fleshed out enough. I feel like this was two distinctly different stories. It was Miles Morales coming into his Spider-Man powers, and then it was the dimension collapsing or whatever, and then all the Spider-Mans being here and having to go back. I feel like if that was two separate episodes, each, an hour long, I feel like that would have been great. But the fact that they kind of combined them here into, a 2-hour movie, and it just felt like I didn't get everything I wanted to get out of both of them. And the fact that this is all we're getting, I just, like I said, it felt incomplete. I didn't feel like, it felt messy. I felt like instead of doing one or the other, they tried to do both, and it didn't work out for me.
I can kind of see that. I mean, I think that Miles Morales' actual comic book origin story doesn't have anything to do with multiple Spider-Mans from other dimensions. That's something that they threw in with the movie, and I think I don't know the comics well. I know the Spider-Man history of comics well enough to get a lot of the references in this, but not enough to really nail the nerdy ones. But I wanted to ask you, like, if I can put on my Dr. Evan hat and see if I can diagnose your problem with the movie. It seems like there's a disconnect in here for you, where the stuff with the Spider-Man coming in thematically didn't connect to Miles coming into his Spider-Man-ness for you. Like, you didn't get that. That just fell apart for you, it sounds like.
Correct. It felt rushed, like, especially I know we're going to talk about this. I know we're going to talk about this a bit later, but the fact that he just happened to magically get his stuff together and start using his powers at the very end. I feel like that had to happen so he could go save the other Spider-Man. But I feel like organically, let's say he did get bit by the spider. He didn't have any fighting skills. He had never learned to use the little, spider web thing. And, he went from being just a nerdy kind of kid with some, who likes to do graffiti artist to being Spider-Man in the course of like 2 days. And that's because the movie required it. I feel like if this would have been a whole movie about him learning to become Spider-Man, and the first, big bad would have been taking down one of those 3 monsters, then that would have been great. But the fact that they combined these two into the one, it just didn't, like I said, he didn't have time to learn his powers. He didn't have time to realize, the implications of what being Spider-Man would be. They just kind of squeezed all that into this movie, and it didn't, like I said, it didn't work for me.
So two things. One, I definitely think you're not the only one who's gonna feel like maybe it's a bit too fast with him becoming Spider-Man right at the end. I feel like it works for me because it's a metaphor. Like, there's so many movies where the hero has to reach down into like themselves to believe in themselves with the encouragement of their friends and family or whoever's around them in the movie. And in this movie, he's got 6 or 5 other spider people around to kind of like train him, sort of. We don't get a lot of that, but there's a little bit of it, and try to get him to go to that place. And they're all like, he's not ready. He doesn't have it yet. But the other thing I wanted to say is I kind of feel like that bit where that didn't really connect for you. It did connect for me because I was thinking about it when I was watching it, and the theme I think that they were trying to hit, and maybe you saw it but it didn't work for you, was this idea of not being alone. So Miles' story, he doesn't know who he wants to be. He doesn't really believe in himself. He doesn't really know where he fits in. One hand, he's supposed to be this law-abiding, disciplined person like his dad wants him to be. On the other hand, he's like craving artistic expression and some sort of like identity of his own and some kind of rebellious like streak, right? And the main thing though is I think he's kind of lonely, and he doesn't really know how to be him. And I feel like where the spider people come in is giving him a community, right? And then that in turn gets him to appreciate the community he already has. The death of his uncle also contributes to that because it's like his Uncle Ben moment. He starts to really realize, wait, I'm in a family. I'm in a community already, Brooklyn, my school, my family, and it's really the spider people, especially Gwen and Peter, that get him to realize that. And so I felt like that stuff connected really well. And while Spider Noir and Spider Ham and Penny don't do a whole lot, I thought Gwen and her story about learning how to have friends again, and then Peter being the old over the hill, cynical gunfighter pulled into things one last time by the younger up-and-comer. That's a classic story. I mean, we've seen that story played out a couple times in the last couple of years to like great effect, in my opinion. Logan had that story. Star Wars The Last Jedi did that with Luke, and I thought that was a great way to use Peter, and I really liked his arc. Surprised me. Like I was saying before, I didn't think he was going to be in the movie that much, right? Because I knew that he died, but I didn't realize there were 2 of them, right? I didn't know there were going to be 2 Peter Parkers. So I really thought that all worked.
That I really, I thought somehow he was faking his death or whatever, and he would come back and, he was just teaching him how to be Spider-Man, and he would come back because Spider-Man always gets back up. The fact that they really killed Spider-Man at the beginning of the movie, that was a shocker to me.
Yeah. Well, the movie can get pretty kind of intense, right? When Aaron dies too, it was like, whoa.
Well, and the fact, his uncle died right in front of him. His uncle was one of the main guys trying to kill him, and the fact that he kind of was just cool, a day later, I was like, they didn't give enough, appreciation to that fact. They built up the relationship, how they bonded, how his uncle was kind of the one guy he could go to when he didn't have anybody else, and the fact that he died right in front of him being one of his major villains. There should be more ethos or pathos to that, whatever the proper Greek terminology. Yeah,
I agree with you. I think about that though.
Yeah, there should be. The movie didn't give enough time to that. The fact that the cop, the dad, his brother just died. They didn't give enough appreciation to the fact of that.
I don't know about that one.
No. I mean, he came to when the dad came to his door. He was like, I want to tell you that something happened, and but. They didn't talk about it. He walked away, and then later on, when they talked on the phone, they talked for like 2 seconds. And from the dad's perspective, Miles just hung up. So they never really completed that. Miles, did have his completion moment hugging his dad and talking to him and all that kind of stuff. But the dad didn't get that. And so I felt like they really didn't appreciate the fact that, hey, my brother just died. Let me take a few moments to sit with that.
Okay, I get that.
Seeing and him already not liking Spider-Man, disliking Spider-Man for being a vigilante, and then coming in to see Spider-Man over his dead brother's body, you think, I thought that he would hate Superman and have, he'd be out for revenge of Superman. But no, that lasted all of 8 seconds, and he saw Spider-Man in the warp dimension thing. And he was like, get up, Spider-Man, you can do it. It's like, I feel like there's a missed scene. There was some there was connective tissue that was missing there.
You know what, man? I can see that. Like I think we're getting there. I think we're getting to what your problem is. I think you needed 15 more minutes. I think you needed 5 minutes devoted to that, because I agree. Like the closure that his dad feels about his brother's death. Now my thing where I was going to object was just Marshala Ali's performance in that scene where he's talking to him through the door. For a voice performance only, I was there with him emotionally. But like, you're right, the closure doesn't really come. It's like it happens off screen. Him realizing that Spider-Man isn't the bad guy, it's like it happens off screen, because you're dead right. Like, he thinks Spider-Man killed Aaron, and then realizes in between somewhere, and then says it to Miles later, who doesn't know Miles is Spider-Man, but he says it later, that he thought Spider-Man was the bad guy and realized he wasn't. But it all happens off screen. And I think we could have we could have used a 2-minute scene about like that. Like, they're trying to do it in the scene with Spider-Man facing off with Kingpin and him watching, because he's seeing, oh, Kingpin's bad. Like, look at him, he looks like a giant walking like ham, just a mean meat man. And of course Spider-Man's a good guy, right? I agree with you.
Even with that, we don't know that they know Kingpin's a bad guy.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, us as the audience knows that, because we've known Kingpin to be bad in all the other Spider-Man and Daredevil movies. We know Kingpin's a bad guy.
Yep.
But in the sense of the movie, he was hosting a fundraiser upstairs.
Yeah.
And, you know, everybody came to watch it, and he was talking about how much he loves Spider-Man. So how do, you know, there's no connectivity, connective tissue saying, you know, for him to understand that Kingpin was the bad guy.
I know, and those shots are trying to do too much, right?
Yeah, and then everybody outside, when they do string up Kingpin with the spider web and the little note saying, you know, hand delivered from your local neighborhood Spider-Man or whatever, the people outside don't know why he's up there.
Right.
They all they know is Kingpin was just hosting a fundraiser, but now he's strung up after all these earthquakes. So there's nothing, you know, I feel like there's just missing stuff.
I think you're right. I think like they all magically realized it was Kingpin's fault. Like, the movie's just kind of like waving it away. I think you're right. Like, I think my initial take on the movie's story was that it was pretty cohesive, but you're finding places where the cohesiveness breaks down. Because you're right, there are missing bits. It's like they cut some stuff for time or something, just assuming that the audience would roll with it and not question it too much. And I kind of hate when movies do that, and it sounds like you do too. I said something earlier about dotting I's and crossing T's, and that's like my favorite way to express when you're going to tell a story. I don't care how predictable or cliche it is. I don't care how many times we've seen it before. You dot those I's, you cross those T's, you know?
Yeah. I mean, in that same vein, that's kind of, you know, my issues there are the same issues I had with the multiple Spider-Mans. The Nicolas Cage Spider-Man, that seemed like a really interesting Spider-Man. I wanted to kind of see what his world was about. You know, we got the little 30-second clip, but, you know, he's a very interesting person. And then the Spider-Pig, you know, I thought the robot little girl Spider-Man, I thought they would kick butt and take names. She's from the year, you know, 3100 something and whatever. I thought she'd be a super fighter, but she got beat pretty quickly, and then the little pig came and beat that guy up.
Yeah.
You know, so it's like, I feel like there's just there wasn't enough development there. I kind of, just because they combined those two alternate, you know, disparate storylines, we didn't really have enough time to develop, you know, what the trailers portrayed the movie to be.
Yeah, so in our imaginary 15 minutes of extra time, maybe 5 of those minutes would have gone towards fleshing out those characters a bit more. Do you feel like you're baiting a sequel, like especially with that last moment when Gwen peeks through a portal at Miles? Because like you said in the preamble to in the non-spoiler section, there's like a romantic feel between the two of them.
I feel like that they were gonna kiss at the end. You know, I know they're kind of young in the story. I mean, the way they kind of led up to it, I figured that's kind of where they were going. But now they were just, let's be friends, you know. But then at the end, she came. I mean, I guess she could have hung out with him in a friend way, but then we have the question of how is she opening the interdimensional portal just to have conversation?
Well, I think it's sequel bait.
If we want to take it there,
you know what I mean?
I mean, I understand that, but just in the logistics, I'm sorry, in the world of the movie, how is that making sense?
Oh, I agree.
How
it's
can
like,
she open the portal?
Have you ever seen Super Mario Brothers?
Yeah, of course.
You know that moment at the end, like the you know, Mario and Luigi go back to the world, and then all of a sudden, Peach shows up. Or Daisy, I should say, she shows up with a gun and she's like, "You're not gonna believe this," and you're like, you know, like the movie's trying to kind of float its way past any questions of like, how does she get there, what's going on, because the idea is to set up like some intrigue for a sequel. And I kind of feel like that's what they were doing with Spider-Verse, and I actually didn't love that. I wish they would have ended it without teasing that. I think that with Miles laying on in the bed, I think he should have started singing again. And that would have been a perfect place to close it, with him kind of coming fully into himself, confident, ready to be Spider-Man, and all that stuff. Like, I thought that was, at home with his family, knowing there's other ones out there, all the good stuff. I thought that was going to be how they ended it. And then, of course, Gwen poking her head through and being like, hey, what's up, Miles? Kind of, just a little bit too much, maybe.
Yeah, it didn't really make sense in the world of the movie, but I appreciate it for what it was. That's what I'm saying. Something like that in a TV show works great because you got 8 more episodes to watch or whatever, so it's just going to be, a procedural, whatever it is, to where every episode, you got some more information.
Yeah, like a serial.
Spending time with the characters or whatever, but you don't get that here, it's just a 2-hour movie. So, like I said, obviously in a a Netflix TV show or something, you're not going to get this level of voice actors. You're not going to get Mahershala Ali to come in for a Netflix show, most likely. But there are a lot of people doing Netflix shows these days.
Well, he did Luke Cage, but I don't know if he would do an animated show.
Yeah, but that he was coming up at that point. Yeah. Now he's I think he's the next Denzel at this point. So
yeah, for sure.
I just so I feel like we I don't know if I think I would prefer this to be a Netflix show. I think I would find that more interesting than I do finding this to be a 2-hour theatrical movie,
Let me pitch you something about that, though, okay? Because I feel like you could say the same thing about Marvel movies, and this, like the regular ones in their universe, where like they're almost like, some people do complain about this. I kind of get what the MCU is doing. I understand they're trying to do this big intertextual project. It's almost like they're making a TV series out of 2-hour-long movies, 3 or 4 a year or whatever. I feel like they were kind of going with, and maybe unwisely, but they were kind of going with the same intertextual storytelling style in this. Like I think they wanted the audience to assume there were going to be more of these, and that they were going to connect to each other, and that there was going to be like this larger story that they were going to start telling in the Miles Morales Spider-Man universe that would resemble in some ways the larger Marvel universe, even though there's no way this animated film could ever be a part of the mainline MCU. It could be part of its own cartoon animated thing where they do the same idea, where all these stories kind of collapse into each other and comment on each other. So it almost does feel like, they're counting a little bit too much on the idea that there's going to be another one, and they're expecting the audience to roll with it a little bit. You would say, go ahead.
Yeah, because Marvel's movies are just so big. Just the spectacle of them are so large. I like them better the way they are, because it's 2 hours of, 2.5 hours of gigantic, special effects and big names and, well-written storylines, that kind of stuff. And I feel like I don't appreciate this because it's animated. I feel like I wouldn't notice it if the animation was just a little bit worse, to where they could pump it out in a episodic kind of manner. Like I was talking about Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles earlier. It looks like a little, realistic cartoon or whatever. And like I said, the animation looks great. But I feel like this would be something I would watch on, on my TV, on my phone, just something to where I'm actually just looking at what happens more than the visual style of it. So I thought this looked pretty good, but if this was, animated a little worse in 12 episodes on Netflix, I would just had more fun with it at the end of the day, So I understand people say that the Avengers Infinity War just felt like a season finale,
sure.
And in one way it did, but that was a 10-year in the making season finale, and where else is that going to exist? There's no way something like that could exist other than the way Marvel did it, and I appreciate it for that level.
Right.
I just don't think Spider-Man is deserving of that kind of just that level of praise or whatever.
Yeah, no, and I'm getting what you're saying. Like it hasn't earned it yet. That's the problem. Yeah. It's like it's playing that game where it's kind of pretending like it's been a bunch of different movies we've already seen in this universe, so that we will already roll with the idea of, oh, there's going to be another one, and oh, we'll see these characters again, and oh, maybe next time we'll spend more time in the Noirverse or the Spider-Ham-verse or whatever. But we don't really know that, because this is the first one. So it's almost like what the DC universe did, where they started with Avengers kind of, or tried to, and try to build their way back up again. Where, like you said, Infinity War is 10 years, and the first Avengers movie was 4 years of like stories that come to a culmination point, right? Yeah, I can see that idea that maybe Into the Spider-Verse didn't quite earn the right to be intertextual in that way. I could see that argument. I was going to ask you, I heard Bob Chipman say it's the best Spider-Man film ever made. And I wanted to ask you, and probably should have done it before the spoiler section, but where do you land on the different Spider-Man movies? Because there's been fucking a million of them.
I think Homecoming, I like that better than this. I feel like that was the movie. I mean, even people did write the article saying that was the best Spider-Man movie ever made, because I feel like that's what this was kind of attempting to be. The young, more playful, young Peter Parker. I thought that's what Homecoming was.
Yeah, there's some similarities. So, I agree.
Yeah.
I thought
that was perfectly fine.
So Homecoming would be like your favorite, is it your favorite, or just what you think the best one is?
The best kind of Spider-Man type movie. I think Spider-Man 2, the Raimi one. I think that was probably my favorite Spider-Man, but I think this was, like I said, Homecoming was the best, for who Spider-Man was in the comics. I know when he gets older, people don't appreciate him, but he's actually like one of the smartest characters in the comic book universe, and he's super strong. So I think people just kind of think of him in the fun-loving neighborhood Spider-Man type of way. So I think as a younger Spider-Man, I think Homecoming kind of was the best version of Spider-Man. I don't think we've seen the older, 20-something year old Spider-Man. We haven't seen the best version of that yet, but I think so far as who Spider-Man is as the character, this was, they were both, this and Homecoming probably my top two, but
what about older Peter Parker then? Because we're talking, so Miles Morales is kind of like Tom Holland's version of Peter Parker, the younger one who's like trying to find his place in the world. But the Tobey Maguire Spider-Man, the Raimi movies, he's on his own. There's no other superheroes, right? And he's older through most of them. Certainly the actor was older than the character, but he's like Spider-Man in his mid to late 20s. And then Andrew Garfield was another 30-year-old playing a high school kid. And I liked the first Amazing Spider-Man well enough, but I thought the second one was hot garbage. I couldn't believe it. Speaking of Jamie Foxx not knowing what he's doing, I said that after that movie that he should fire his agent, right? Because Jamie Foxx is amazing, but he's been in a lot more than his fair share of bad movies. But I was gonna say that the Tom Holland Spider-Man, that's Peter Parker still. So what did you think about? Because this is the first time we're getting to see an over-the-hill Peter Parker who's like in his 30s or 40s, and he's just done. And I don't know if you noticed, but Chris Pine played Golden Boy, blonde, 26 years old, mega Spider-Man, the one that dies. And then Jake Johnson, different voice actors, right, plays the old, tired, chubby version, right? And I think that old Peter Parker is my favorite character in the movie. So, and I didn't expect that. So I'd like to get your thoughts on him.
It just seemed too kind of cliche, too rote. I wasn't surprised by that arc. I feel like from the beginning you knew what that was going to be.
Right.
I never thought he was going to come, since he was single, and then Mary Jane was newly single because her Peter Parker died. I never thought they were going to get together. I always knew he was going to go back, get his stuff together, and try again, because that's kind of, I feel like that's where it was going to go from the beginning.
Yeah, that's his arc.
I liked him as the character, because as I said earlier, that's Nick, that's Nick from New Girl. That's kind of the character he's playing. If Nick turned into Spider-Man and dropped Jessica, that's what this would be, so actually, now that I think of it, if Nick and Jessica got married, Nick became Spider-Man, him and Jessica didn't work out, this would be who Nick was, and then he'd get his stuff together and try to go win Jessica back. So that's what I see in this role.
Yeah, I don't know New Girl,
but
I know Jake Johnson, and I can kind of see he does kind of play a type, right?
Yeah, that's the Jake Johnson type.
Yeah.
So I thought his arc was pretty predictable. So I wouldn't say he was my favorite character. Probably Gwen Stacy was my favorite character.
That's a good pick too, though. I think my wife's favorite character was Gwen Stacy, because she was surprised that she didn't even know there was a Spider Girl or Spider Woman, right? She knows like probably a fraction about the comics or the lore behind all this than we would, right? So Yeah, like I think she's a solid pick, but here's my thing about predictability though, and this is something I hear people talk about a lot. My brother, for instance, always talks about predictability in movies, and I get it too. You know, I see that too, like that it's predictable. Like I knew he was going to go back. I knew what his arc was. I've seen the story. Like I said, Logan, same thing. Luke Skywalker, same thing, except those guys die. The idea is that you get this guy who's cynical and over the hill and bitter and jaded, and try to bring them back, get them to give a shit again, right? And I really like, I guess I just like that trope, because I see that it is a trope and it's something we see a lot, but I like it when it's well done. And I thought it was here. I thought that they didn't short him the way that they might have with the other Spider people, right? Gwen gets a story too, but I don't even know if they spent as much time on her as they did on Peter, just because Peter's kind of the mentor figure, right?
Yeah, I'll give you that. Yeah, they really, they didn't cut it short. He felt really kind of fleshed out. The trope is a trope.
Yeah.
It felt like a fully fleshed out version of it, to where he talked to Mary Jane the way he would talk to in a kind of comedic way, like we expect from Jake Johnson, to where he was talking to her like she was his Mary Jane with the double entendre. It really worked for me. I thought it was funny. I thought, it really kind of played to who that guy was, and throughout the movie, he really showed he was the old grizzled Spider-Man that's, too old for this shit, but he knows his stuff, so.
And he can still laugh at himself, which is like the best, right? Because that's Spider-Man's whole thing. Like he's still quipping and making one-liners and.
I think my favorite line probably in the movie was, now he's going to say you have 24 hours. And then he goes, you have 24 hours. just that, because he's been through this many times before. He knows the Spider-Man role. So none of this is new to him. So that's kind of, I felt like, that's why he was kind of the leader of the pack. Because, he's the most Spider-Man-y of the Spider-Man there.
Yep.
But, I mean, at the same token, he's exactly who I felt the Spider-Man at the beginning was, had he not, broken up with Mary Jane. Because from that first speech, he was like, I'll get back up. We'll get out of this just fine. I've been through this 100 times. I know the drill. So I thought, he knew the drill. But he actually did die that time. So the fact that he stayed there was a shocker to me. But I guess, it's a Highlander rules. There can be only one.
In a good way or a bad way? Because I thought their willingness to kill a Peter Parker so early in the movie was pretty ballsy. Like, did you think it was it unpleasant, like an unpleasant surprise for you, or was it like something where you're like, whoa, okay, this movie's got stakes?
No, I didn't really feel like it was stakes. I feel like he had, like I said, Highlander rules. He had to die so Miles could be the new, Spider-Man.
Right.
But
and that is what happens. I think
like
in the Miles comics is that Peter Parker does exist, but he dies, and then Miles Morales is forced to like kind of pick up the cowl, as it were, right?
Yeah, and I understand if that's the way it has to be, it has to be. It just didn't feel earned, I guess, because it happened the way it happened. I just didn't. Spider-Man's death didn't really land to me, because I just felt like, oh, he'll be back. You don't talk like that and stay dead. He'll be back.
Yeah.
But no, he stayed dead.
Well, speaking of which, what did you think of Kingpin in this movie? Because I thought they were borrowing a little bit from the Daredevil TV show, and this movie went through some rewrites, and I imagine they wanted to give us a little bit more of some pathos, like you said earlier, with Kingpin. There's not a lot, but there's some there, and I was wondering what you thought of that.
I just felt he was too. I mean, he was perfect for what it was, but just so over the top comic booky villain. I understand. I'm trying to get my wife and son back, and it's Spider-Man's fault. I understand that, but I mean, it's just like I said, it's just too. He had the same problem I felt. What's his name from the bad guy from Venom?
Oh, Riz Ahmed's character. I can't. Riot.
Yeah, Riz Ahmed's character. I forgot. Yeah, Riot. Whatever his name was in the movie, he had the same problem, to where he was unnecessarily over the top. Like, I understand you're going to be a bad guy, but come on, the machine was just destroyed, and you went back working in 24 hours. But I guess that's the comic booky type.
It's like
stuff,
obsessed, right? Like, comic booky type stuff's a good way to put it. I think this movie had that problem. It was a nice surprise. Like what I really thought worked was aesthetics. So like Prowler, Aaron, his uncle Aaron's like bad guy alter ego. Mm-hmm. So whenever he was around, and the movie was full of clever things like this. This is just one example. He had that they had that over the top sort of sound effect that almost sounded like it was coming from the suit or something, like this kind of bestial like thing. But it was actually the non-diegetic, I think that's the term, music in the score for the movie that was doing that. And they wait till an emotionally pivotal moment to show you that when Miles finds out that it's Aaron, that's when they drop the soundtrack back, and you know that it's not something that's coming from the suit, right? So that's, on one hand, that's like a really clever trick. On the other hand, all the villains in the movie, while aesthetically interesting and cool, they kind of had that old school MCU problem where they were like underdeveloped. They didn't really feel like real people. They felt like really obsessed megalomaniacs. I think the MCU has kind of fixed its villain problem. I can't remember the last MCU movie that had a bad villain. Maybe Thor 2 was the last one I could think of that had a bad villain. But like Malekith, right? And those guys, like those villains, were always just really one note. Like they had their obsession, that the reason why they're trying to fuck everything up, and they would never deviate, and they'd be cartoonishly over the top evil, right? And sometimes it was fun, like Ronan the Accuser, because you have a movie where you got Chris Pratt making fun of him. That works really well. But then you get other times it's just like paper thin. And I kind of felt like there was a little bit, they tried to make Kingpin relatable in the teensiest, tiniest way with that whole family bit, but they just didn't really get there. And Aaron dies almost as soon as you find out that he's Prowler. So there's a bit in there because the performances are good. But really it works a lot better, I think, in terms of style and aesthetics than it does in terms of having the time to really make that characterization stick. Yeah.
So like I said, just his death didn't, like I said, the movie led him up to be such an interesting uncle. The fact that we didn't really appreciate his death was another letdown for me. So I mean, like overall, I think, like I said, at the end of the day, my problem with this movie is a lot of interesting setup, but not enough good payoff, for me, in my opinion.
Fair enough.
But yeah, so I mean, so I guess final thoughts. What did you, in spoilers, would you recommend Spider-Man?
Absolutely. I think that visually, I see enough animation films to be able to tell the difference between this and something else, like Incredibles 2 even, which was a disappointment, but is probably, in terms of pedigree and professionalism and the artistry involved, pretty close to what this turned out to be. I'm a big fan of Phil Lord and Chris Miller, and Phil Lord wrote this movie and it produced it, and it has some of the same, it's just this aesthetic style thing. Like he even puts in some of the comic book stuff. All of that stuff works really well and brings you into the movie. Even if you end up feeling, as Sterling did, that it doesn't quite stick the landing all the way, I feel like the aesthetics, just seeing something new in terms of the animation style and what they're doing artistically here, is well worth it.
Yeah, indeed. Like I said, I'm complaining a whole lot, but I enjoyed watching it. So, I mean, at the end of the day, my thoughts on it. Hopefully, if you're at this point listening to it, you've already seen the movie. But if you've heard all this and you still want to know whether or not you should go see it, I say go see it. So that is our review of Spider-Man. Next week, if you follow up on us, we'll be reviewing Aquaman. So tune in for that. Mr. Evan, where can people find you on the internet?
Right now, the best place to find me is Sirwaka's Movies, or Sirwaka.com, I should say, and the Sirr's Movies podcast.
Indeed. You can find me on Twitter at sirwaka.com. Thank you, and we'll see you next week.